They called her Cyclone, but never let her fly into one. Captain Miranda Westbrook had been relegated to supply runs and routine transport missions for 14 months, dismissed as too reckless for real combat operations. When 8 Navy SEALs became trapped on a mountainside during the worst sandstorm in Afghan military history, every qualified rescue pilot was either grounded by weather conditions or declared the mission impossible. Hurricane-force winds carrying blinding sand, zero visibility, enemy fire, and a 6-hour window before exposure and enemy forces claimed American lives. That's when someone remembered the woman they'd been keeping away from the storms. What happened next took exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes of flying that rewrote every manual on impossible rescues. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning sun cast long shadows across Forward Operating Base Sentinel as Captain Miranda Westbrook completed her pre-flight inspection of Black Hawk Tail number 8724681. Her hands moved with practiced precision across every rivet, every rotor blade connection, every fuel line that might mean the difference between life and death at 8,000 feet. The ritual had become both meditation and defiance, a daily reminder that excellence in preparation could overcome institutional prejudice. Still babying that bird like it's made of glass, Westbrook? Captain Declan Stratford's voice carried the familiar edge of condescension as he approached with his flight crew. His Black Hawk, freshly returned from a high-priority reconnaissance mission in the Kandahar province, bore the scorch marks and bullet holes that marked real combat operations. Miranda continued her inspection without looking up. "Just ensuring my aircraft doesn't end up scattered across a mountainside due to preventable mechanical failure," she replied evenly, running her fingers along a hydraulic coupling that showed the faintest sign of wear. Stratford laughed, the sound echoing off the maintenance hangar walls. "Right, because your supply runs to Forward Operating Base Dusty are exactly the same as flying combat missions into hostile territory. When's the last time someone shot at your medical supplies, Cyclone?" The nickname stung precisely because it represented everything she had been denied. They called her Cyclone for her aggressive flying style during training exercises, but the same commanders who awarded the moniker refused to let her prove herself when weather conditions demanded exactly that kind of aggressive precision. Sergeant First Class Thaddeus Wellington emerged from beneath the aircraft, grease-stained hands holding a torque wrench that had seen decades of service. Tank, as everyone called him, had been Miranda's crew chief for 8 months, long enough to understand that her meticulous attention to detail stemmed from frustration rather than fear. "All systems green, Captain," Tank reported, his Louisiana drawl making even technical reports sound conversational. "Though I still think you're wasting talent on these milk runs. This bird could handle anything you throw at it." Miranda appreciated Tank's confidence, but institutional reality remained unchanged. Colonel Benedict Chamberlain had made his position clear during her arrival briefing 14 months ago. "Westbrook, I don't care what your training records show. Combat aviation requires split-second decisions under extreme pressure. Women excel at methodical operations, but when bullets start flying, instincts matter more than preparation." Those words had echoed through every mission assignment since, while Stratford and the other male pilots received calls for casualty evacuations, close air support, and special operations insertions. Miranda found herself relegated to what Tank diplomatically called essential logistics operations, supply runs, mail delivery, transport missions for personnel who weren't in immediate danger. The irony wasn't lost on her. Growing up in Oregon's Cascade Mountains, Miranda had learned to fly her father's Vietnam-era Huey through conditions that would ground commercial aircraft. Mountain flying required reading wind patterns that changed every 100 feet of altitude, navigating through weather systems that could shift from clear skies to zero visibility in minutes, and maintaining aircraft control when sudden downdrafts tried to slam helicopters into unforgiving granite faces. Those skills had earned her top marks in every phase of military flight training, but superior performance in controlled environments apparently didn't translate to confidence from commanding officers who had never seen her navigate through conditions that would test the limits of both machine and pilot. Lieutenant Commander Serafina Blackthorne appeared around the corner of the maintenance hangar, her medical bag indicating another routine transport mission. Angel, as the flight surgeon preferred to be called, had become Miranda's closest ally among the commissioned officers. perhaps because she understood the challenges of proving professional competence in a male-dominated environment. "Morning, Miranda," Angel said, her voice carrying warmth that contrasted sharply with the clinical precision she brought to medical emergencies. "Ready for another exciting journey to deliver medical supplies to Forward Operating Base Dusty?" Miranda nodded, though excitement wasn't the word she would have chosen. "At least the weather's clear today. No complications from wind shear or thermal updrafts." Speaking of weather, Angel glanced toward the operations center where morning briefings were conducted. "Have you heard about the storm system moving in from the west?" Technical Sergeant Ashworth mentioned wind speeds that might ground all aircraft by afternoon. Technical Sergeant Isadora Ashworth, known throughout the base as Control, managed air traffic coordination with an efficiency that kept dozens of aircraft safely separated across hundreds of square miles of contested airspace. Her weather reports carried the weight of life and death decisions, and veteran pilots had learned to respect her meteorological instincts. "How bad?" Miranda asked, genuine concern replacing frustration. Sandstorms in this region could reduce visibility to zero within minutes, creating conditions that challenged even the most experienced aviators. "Bad enough that Colonel Chamberlain might cancel all non-essential flights," Angel replied, "which means our medical supply run could be postponed until tomorrow." Miranda felt the familiar mixture of disappointment and relief. Disappointment because every canceled mission represented another day without the opportunity to prove herself under challenging conditions. Relief because she wouldn't have to endure another routine flight while watching other pilots return with stories of missions that actually mattered. Tank finished securing the aircraft's engine compartment and approached with the easy confidence of someone who had survived multiple combat deployments. "Captain, if you don't mind me saying, this whole situation is backwards. I've flown with pilots who couldn't handle a supply run to the base commissary, and I've seen you navigate through conditions that would have them praying for solid ground." "Appreciate the vote of confidence, Tank," Miranda replied, "but institutional change happens gradually. I just need to wait for the right opportunity to demonstrate capability under actual combat conditions." "Opportunity might not wait for institutional change," Angel observed quietly. "Sometimes proving yourself requires taking calculated risks that go beyond assigned mission parameters." Before Miranda could respond, the base's emergency klaxon began wailing with the distinctive pattern that indicated a combat emergency. All three looked toward the operations center as personnel began running toward their assigned emergency positions. Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton's voice crackled over the base-wide communication system. "All flight crews report to operations immediately. We have a SEAL team in contact and requesting immediate extraction under deteriorating weather conditions." Miranda felt her heart rate increase as the implications became clear. A SEAL team in trouble meant lives at stake. Deteriorating weather meant challenging flying conditions. Immediate extraction meant every available pilot would be needed. "This is it," Tank said, grabbing his flight gear. "This is your chance to show them what Cyclone actually means." As they hurried toward the operations center, Miranda allowed herself a moment of hope. Perhaps today would be different. Perhaps institutional prejudice would take a backseat to operational necessity. Perhaps she would finally get the opportunity to prove that preparation, skill, and determination could overcome any assumptions about gender limitations in combat aviation. The klaxon continued wailing as they approached the building where mission assignments would determine who flew into danger and who remained safely on the ground. Miranda Westbrook was about to discover whether 14 months of frustration had been preparation for this moment, or just another disappointment in a career defined by unrealized potential. Inside the operations center, she could hear Colonel Chamberlain's voice cutting through the chaos of emergency preparation. The tone suggested this was no routine extraction request. This was the kind of mission that tested every aspect of military aviation capability. The kind of mission Miranda had been training for her entire career, but had never been allowed to fly. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The operations center buzzed with controlled chaos as Miranda pushed through the crowd of pilots, crew chiefs, and intelligence officers gathering around the primary briefing board. Digital displays showed satellite imagery of mountainous terrain 47 miles northeast of their position, where red markers indicated hostile activity and a flashing blue beacon marked the last known position of Bravo Team 7. Colonel Benedict Chamberlain stood before the assembled personnel, his weathered face reflecting decades of making decisions that determined whether American soldiers came home alive. Behind him, Captain Theodore Blackwater adjusted reconnaissance photographs that painted a grim tactical picture. "Gentlemen, we have 8 Navy SEALs pinned down on a ridgeline approximately 2 clicks south of Collapse-sur-Ca," Chamberlain began, his voice cutting through ambient conversation with military precision. Master Chief Donovan's team was conducting a high-value target elimination when they encountered significantly more resistance than intelligence estimates predicted. Miranda found herself positioned behind taller officers, straining to see the tactical displays that would determine mission assignments. Tank stood beside her, his expression growing increasingly serious as details emerged about the crisis unfolding in the mountains. Current enemy strength is estimated at 40 to 60 fighters with heavy weapons, including RPGs and possibly mortars, Blackwater added, pointing to terrain features that showed excellent defensive positions. The team established an overwatch position here, but they're surrounded with no clear escape routes. Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton, whose expertise in communications had earned him the call sign Wire, stepped forward with radio equipment that crackled with distant voices. The static-filled transmissions painted an audio picture of Americans under intense pressure. "Sir, last communication from Master Chief Donovan indicates they have wounded personnel and ammunition running low," Wire reported. "They're requesting immediate extraction," but he hesitated, glancing toward the meteorological station where Technical Sergeant Isadora Ashworth monitored weather patterns with obvious concern. "But the weather window is closing rapidly," Control finished, her voice carrying the authority of someone whose forecasts determined flight safety across the entire operational area. Satellite imagery shows a massive sandstorm system approaching from the southwest. Wind speeds already exceed 40 knots, and visibility is dropping below minimums for standard helicopter operations. Miranda felt her pulse quicken as she recognized the convergence of factors that created both opportunity and extreme danger. SEALs in immediate peril, challenging weather conditions, and the need for precision flying under combat pressure. Everything she had trained for, everything she had been denied the chance to attempt. Major General Cordelia Lexington entered the briefing room with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to making command decisions under impossible circumstances. Hammer, as she was known throughout the theater, had earned her reputation by accomplishing missions that other commanders declared unfeasible. "Status report," Hammer demanded, her eyes immediately focusing on the tactical displays that showed American personnel in mortal danger. "Ma'am, we have multiple challenges converging simultaneously," Chamberlain replied. "Bravo Team 7 needs extraction within the next 4 hours, but weather conditions are deteriorating toward levels that exceed safe flying parameters for rescue operations." "Available aircraft and pilots?" Hammer inquired, though her expression suggested she already anticipated problems with conventional solutions. Captain Declan Stratford stepped forward with obvious confidence. "Ma'am, I can lead a 2-ship formation for immediate extraction. My crew has extensive experience with combat rescues in challenging conditions." Chamberlain nodded approvingly, but Control shook her head with unmistakable disagreement. "Captain Stratford, current wind conditions at the target location are gusting to 55 knots with visibility reduced to less than a quarter mile. Those parameters exceed operational limits for formation flying in mountainous terrain." "Then we go single ship," Stratford insisted. "1 aircraft, minimum crew, get in fast and extract our people before conditions worsen further." Before anyone could respond, Chief Warrant Officer Barnaby Livingston emerged from behind a maintenance status board with news that changed every calculation. Torque, whose mechanical expertise kept the squadron's aircraft mission ready, carried a clipboard that listed maintenance issues affecting flight operations. "Sir, we have a problem," Torque announced. "Aircraft 8624403 developed transmission problems during this morning's reconnaissance mission. Aircraft 8726789 is down for scheduled maintenance on the rotor head assembly. Aircraft 8524112 suffered hydraulic failure 20 minutes ago during engine run-up. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. 3 aircraft unavailable meant limited options for a rescue mission that already pushed the boundaries of operational feasibility." "How many mission-ready aircraft do we have?" Hammer asked, though her tone suggested she expected disappointing news. "2, ma'am," Torque replied. "Captain Stratford's Bird and—" He glanced toward Miranda, with an expression that suggested recognition of competence despite institutional prejudice. Captain Westbrook's aircraft, which completed full inspection this morning and shows green across all systems. Miranda felt every eye in the room turn toward her, some with surprise, others with skepticism that had become painfully familiar. The moment she had been waiting for had arrived, but not in the way she had imagined. "Westbrook's been flying supply runs," someone muttered from the back of the room. "This mission requires combat rescue experience." "Experience everyone gets by flying their first combat rescue," Angel interjected quietly, her medical perspective cutting through objections with logical precision. "Captain Westbrook has demonstrated superior flying skills in controlled conditions. Combat simply adds pressure to existing capabilities." Lieutenant Colonel Augustus Whitfield, whose liaison work with Afghan forces had earned him the call sign Vanguard, studied the tactical situation with the perspective of someone who understood how rapidly combat situations could deteriorate. "Colonel, we're facing a time-critical rescue with deteriorating conditions and limited aircraft availability," Vanguard observed. "The question isn't whether Captain Westbrook has combat rescue experience. The question is whether we can afford to leave capable aircraft and qualified pilots on the ground while American personnel face elimination." Master Chief Petty Officer Kane Donovan's voice suddenly crackled through the radio equipment with an urgency that silenced all debate. Wire quickly adjusted frequency settings to improve the signal clarity. "Falcon Base, this is Bravo 7, came the distant transmission broken by static and the sound of automatic weapons fire. We are taking heavy casualties. Enemy forces are advancing on our position from multiple directions. Request immediate extraction, or we will not survive the next engagement." The raw desperation in Donovan's voice cut through institutional concerns about pilot assignments and gender considerations. 8 Navy SEALs were dying while military protocol debated whether Miranda deserved the opportunity to save them. Petty Officer 2nd Class Sterling Fairfax, whose navigation expertise had earned him the call sign North, approached the briefing board with maps that showed terrain details crucial for planning extraction routes. "Sir, the target location requires precise navigation through mountain passes with rapidly changing wind conditions," North reported. "GPS signals may be unreliable due to terrain masking, which means dead reckoning navigation and visual references under extremely limited visibility." "Exactly the kind of flying that separates competent pilots from exceptional ones," Tank said quietly, though his words carried clearly through the briefing room. "Captain Westbrook has trained extensively in mountain navigation under adverse conditions." Miranda realized this was her moment. Not the gradual opportunity she had hoped for, but a crisis that demanded immediate action and offered no time for institutional hesitation. "Sir, request permission to speak," she said, her voice steady, despite the magnitude of what she was about to propose. Chamberlain nodded reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the direction events were taking. "Colonel, I volunteer for the extraction mission," Miranda stated clearly. "My aircraft is mission-ready, my crew is experienced, and the tactical situation requires immediate action, regardless of previous mission assignments." "Westbrook, this isn't a supply run," Chamberlain replied. "Combat rescue operations require split-second decisions under extreme pressure with enemy forces actively trying to kill you." "Sir, with respect, every aspect of military aviation requires split-second decisions under extreme pressure," Miranda responded. "The only difference is whether the pressure comes from weather, terrain, mechanical failure, or enemy action. The flying skills remain identical." Corporal Anastasia Pembroke, whose mechanical expertise had earned her the nickname Spark, stepped forward with maintenance records that supported Miranda's readiness. "Sir, Captain Westbrook's aircraft maintenance logs show consistent attention to detail and proactive problem identification," Spark reported. Her pre-flight inspections averaged 47 minutes compared to the standard 20-minute requirement. That level of preparation indicates someone who understands that small oversights create large problems under stress. Another burst of static from the radio brought Donovan's voice through with increasing desperation. "Falcon Base, enemy forces are within 50 meters of our position. We have multiple wounded and are nearly out of ammunition. If extraction doesn't happen within the next hour, recommend you mark this position as a combat loss." The stark finality of those words settled over the briefing room like a physical weight. Time for debate had expired. American lives hung in the balance while institutional prejudice consumed precious minutes. Hammer stepped forward with the command authority that had earned her reputation for making impossible decisions under extreme pressure. Colonel Chamberlain, we have 2 qualified pilots, 2 mission-ready aircraft, and 8 Navy SEALs who will die if we waste more time on personnel assignments, she declared. Launch both aircraft immediately. Stratford takes lead position. Westbrook provides backup and alternate extraction capability. Miranda felt a surge of both relief and terror. Finally, the opportunity to prove herself under actual combat conditions. But success meant everything, while failure meant not only her career, but the lives of 8 Americans who had trusted their military to bring them home alive. As the briefing dissolved into rapid mission preparation, Miranda headed toward her aircraft with Tank beside her and Angel following close behind. The sandstorm was visible on the horizon as a brown wall of destruction moving toward the mountains where SEALs fought for their lives. Within minutes, she would discover whether 14 months of frustration had been preparation for this moment, or just the prologue to a failure that would haunt her forever. Miranda's boots hit the tarmac at a dead run as she and Tank raced toward their Black Hawk. The rotor blades were already beginning their slow rotation, hydraulic systems powering up with the distinctive whine that marked the transition from ground maintenance to flight operations. Angel secured her medical equipment in the cabin while checking supplies that might mean the difference between saving wounded SEALs or watching them die during extraction. "Fuel status?" Miranda called over the increasing engine noise as she strapped into the pilot's seat. "Tank's topped off, ma'am," Tank replied from his crew chief position. "Full combat load of ammunition, extra medical supplies, and emergency survival gear. We're heavy, but within operational limits." Through her headset, Miranda heard Control's voice coordinating the dual aircraft launch. "Falcon 17 and Falcon 23, you are cleared for immediate departure. Current winds at target location are gusting to 60 knots, with visibility dropping to 1/8 of a mile. Weather window is closing rapidly." Captain Stratford's voice came through the radio with practiced confidence. "Falcon 17 ready for departure. 2, 3, maintain standard formation spacing until we reach the mountain passes." Miranda keyed her microphone, feeling the weight of everyone's expectations. "Falcon 23 ready. Formation spacing understood." The moment her skids lifted from the concrete, Miranda felt the familiar sensation of complete control that came with piloting aircraft through challenging conditions. This was where months of training and natural ability converged into something approaching artistry. The Black Hawk responded to her touch like an extension of her own nervous system. But within minutes of departure, the weather conditions revealed themselves as far worse than briefing estimates. The approaching sandstorm had accelerated, creating walls of churning debris that reduced visibility to mere yards. Flying formation became an exercise in maintaining visual contact with Stratford's aircraft while navigating terrain that rose sharply toward the target coordinates. 2-3, I'm having difficulty maintaining visual reference, Stratford transmitted, his voice carrying the first hint of concern. "These dust clouds are thicker than anything I've encountered." Miranda adjusted her flight path slightly, using terrain features barely visible through the brown haze. Growing up, flying through Oregon's mountain valleys had taught her to read landscape even when visibility approached zero. Every ridge, every outcropping, every change in wind direction provided navigational information that instruments couldn't deliver. 17, recommend we follow the river valley approach, Miranda suggested. Terrain masking will provide some protection from crosswinds, and the water features give us consistent navigation references. -2-3, Stratford replied firmly. Standard approach route maintains better tactical positioning. Stay in formation and follow my lead. Angel's voice came through the intercom from the cabin. Miranda, I'm monitoring the SEAL team frequency. Their situation is deteriorating rapidly. Master Chief Donovan reports they're down to magazines and grenades. The urgency in those words cut through any concerns about formation protocol or command hierarchy. 8 Navy SEALs were dying, while aircraft followed standard procedures that hadn't been designed for these specific conditions. Tank's voice crackled through the headset with growing alarm. Captain, 17 is deviating from optimal course. He's fighting crosswinds that are pushing him toward the ridge face. Miranda watched through the swirling sand as Stratford's aircraft struggled against wind shear that threatened to slam it into granite walls rising on both sides of their route. His Black Hawk pitched violently as opposing air currents created turbulence that challenged even experienced pilots. 17, recommend immediate course correction to avoid terrain collision. Miranda transmitted, her voice steady despite watching her fellow pilot fight for control. 2-3, Maintain formation and stay off the radio unless you have emergency traffic, Stratford replied tersely, though his aircraft continued struggling against conditions that exceeded normal operational parameters. Master Chief Donovan's voice suddenly broke through on the emergency frequency with desperate clarity. "Any Falcon aircraft, this is Bravo 7. We are under sustained attack from 3 directions. Multiple wounded, ammunition critical. If extraction doesn't happen in the next 30 minutes, we're going to be overrun." The raw desperation in those words crystallized everything for Miranda. Formation protocol and command hierarchy meant nothing if Americans died while pilots followed procedures designed for different circumstances. Petty Officer First Class Ezra Beaumont's voice joined the radio traffic, his call sign Ghost carrying through static and weapons fire. "Falcon aircraft. Enemy forces are advancing up the south face of our position. We can hold them for maybe 20 minutes, but after that..." He didn't need to finish. Everyone understood the mathematics of combat when ammunition ran out, and enemy forces achieved overwhelming tactical advantage. Tank's warning came with urgent intensity. Captain 17 is in serious trouble. Those crosswinds are exceeding his aircraft's ability to maintain controlled flight. Miranda watched in horror as Stratford's Blackhawk suddenly pitched nose down toward the rocky terrain below. Emergency power couldn't overcome wind shear that had turned the aircraft into a barely controlled projectile hurtling towards certain destruction. "Mayday, Mayday," Stratford's voice filled the radio frequency with the terror of imminent death. "Falcon 17 is going down. Repeat, Falcon 17 is going down." The crash happened with sickening finality. Stratford's aircraft disappeared behind a ridge face, followed immediately by a column of black smoke that marked the end of both the lead rescue aircraft and any hope of extraction through conventional means. Control's voice crackled through the radio with professional composure that barely masked personal anguish. "Falcon 2-3, Falcon 17 is confirmed down. You are now the primary rescue asset for Bravo 7 extraction." Miranda felt the weight of impossible responsibility settle over her like physical pressure. 8 Navy SEALs fighting for their lives. 4 aircrew members down behind enemy lines. Weather conditions that had just claimed one of the squadron's most experienced pilots, and she was now the only hope for bringing any of them home alive. 2-3 copies, she replied, her voice carrying determination that surprised even herself. Proceeding to target coordinates for immediate extraction of all American personnel. Angel's voice came through the intercom with medical authority. "Miranda, I need to know about Stratford's crew. If they survive the crash, they'll need immediate medical evacuation in addition to the SEAL team." "Tank, what's your assessment of our fuel situation?" Miranda asked, knowing that multiple extractions would push her aircraft to operational limits. "We've got enough fuel for the mission plus reserve," Tank replied, "but the weather's getting worse every minute. These winds are going to make landing and takeoff extremely dangerous." Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton's voice joined the frequency from his communications position back at base. 2-3, we're losing radio contact with Bravo 7. Last transmission indicated enemy forces within 25 meters of their position. Miranda adjusted her course toward terrain features that offered the best approach route to the SEAL team's position. The river valley she had suggested earlier now became her primary navigation reference as visibility continued deteriorating toward zero. But as she guided her aircraft through mountain passes that had just claimed another pilot, Miranda realized that reaching the target coordinates was only the beginning of an impossible mission. Landing in hurricane-force winds while under enemy fire, evacuating wounded personnel, and then repeating the process for Stratford's downed crew would require flying skills that existed at the very edge of human capability. Lieutenant Colonel Augustus Whitfield's voice came through the radio with intelligence updates that painted an increasingly grim tactical picture. 2-3. Enemy reinforcements are moving toward both crash sites. You're going to be flying into a significantly larger hostile force than originally estimated. The numbers were becoming overwhelming. More enemy fighters, worse weather conditions, multiple extraction sites, and time running out for everyone involved. Everything that could go wrong with a rescue mission was happening simultaneously. Tank's voice carried both warning and encouragement. "Captain, we're approaching the target area, but I've never seen conditions like this. The landing zone is going to be a nightmare." Through her windscreen, Miranda could barely make out terrain features that marked their approach to the area where Navy SEALs had been fighting a losing battle against impossible odds. The sandstorm had transformed familiar landmarks into an alien landscape where navigation required instincts that went beyond training. Angel checked her medical equipment one final time. "I'm ready for casualties, but we need to get on the ground fast. Every minute we spend in the air is another minute those men are dying." As Miranda began her descent toward a landing zone that existed somewhere in the swirling chaos below, she whispered the same prayer her father had taught her before every challenging flight. "Bring them home safe." Then she pushed her aircraft into conditions that would test every aspect of her flying ability, knowing that failure meant not only her own death but the deaths of everyone counting on her to achieve the impossible. The mountainside materialized through the sandstorm like a vision from hell. Miranda's Black Hawk descended through air so thick with debris that her rotor wash created miniature tornadoes of sand and rock fragments. Below, muzzle flashes erupted in rapid succession as the trapped SEAL team fought desperately to maintain their shrinking perimeter against converging enemy forces. "I've got visual on Bravo 7's position," Miranda announced, her voice steady despite flying through conditions that would have grounded most aircraft. Marking multiple hostile positions surrounding their overwatch point. Tank swiveled his door-mounted machine gun toward targets that appeared and disappeared in the swirling dust clouds. "Captain, I count at least 30 enemy fighters moving up the south slope. They're using the storm as cover for a final assault." The tactical situation had deteriorated beyond anything described in the original briefing. What should have been a routine extraction had become a combat rescue operation in the middle of a pitched battle, with visibility measured in yards rather than miles. Master Chief Kane Donovan's voice crackled through the radio with the controlled desperation of someone who had exhausted all other options. "Falcon 2-3, this is Sledge. We've got wounded personnel who can't move under their own power. Need you to put down as close as possible to our position." Miranda studied the terrain through her windscreen, searching for any flat surface large enough to accommodate a Black Hawk landing. The SEALs had established their defensive position on a rocky outcropping that offered excellent fields of fire but limited options for helicopter access. "Sledge, I see your position," Miranda replied, "but the only viable landing zone is directly in the line of enemy fire. You'll need to suppress those positions before I can set down safely." Petty Officer First Class Ezra Beaumont's voice joined the radio traffic, his call sign Ghost carrying through automatic weapons fire that sounded dangerously close. 2-3, we're down to our last magazines, can't maintain suppressive fire for much longer. The mathematics were brutal and simple. The SEALs lacked ammunition for sustained fire suppression. Enemy forces were advancing under cover of the sandstorm, and landing in an unsecured zone meant certain destruction for the rescue aircraft. Angel's voice came through the intercom with medical urgency. "Miranda, I can see at least 3 wounded personnel in their position. One looks like he might not survive much longer without immediate medical intervention." Miranda made a decision that contradicted every rule of military aviation safety. Instead of waiting for the landing zone to be secured, she would use her aircraft as the primary suppression weapon while simultaneously conducting the rescue operation. "Tank, I'm going to hover directly over their position and provide cover fire while you fast rope down to assist with casualty evacuation," she announced. "Angel, prepare for immediate medical treatment of critically wounded personnel." "Captain, that puts us in a stationary hover while taking fire from multiple directions," Tank replied. "It's tactically unsound and extremely dangerous." "Everything about this mission is tactically unsound and extremely dangerous," Miranda responded. "But those men are dying while we discuss operational safety." She brought the Black Hawk into a precise hover 30 feet above the SEAL team's position, using the aircraft's bulk to shield the Americans below while exposing herself to enemy fire from surrounding ridgelines. The helicopter shuddered under the impact of small arms fire as insurgents realized the rescue aircraft presented an unmissable target. Tank dropped his fast rope and descended into chaos. Below, the SEAL team maintained defensive positions among granite boulders while attempting to load their wounded onto improvised stretchers. Enemy fighters had closed to within 50 meters, their advance slowed only by accurate fire from the remaining operational team members. 2-3, we've got RPGs! Ghost's warning came just as Miranda spotted the distinctive smoke trail of an incoming rocket-propelled grenade. She jerked the aircraft sideways with violent input that stressed the airframe beyond normal operational limits. The RPG streaked past her rotor disc, close enough that the explosion behind them showered the aircraft with rock fragments and metal debris. Aircraft damage assessment, Miranda called, fighting to maintain controlled flight while maneuvering to avoid additional rocket fire. Minor shrapnel damage to the tail boom. Tank reported from the ground, but all critical systems appear functional. I'm loading the first casualty now. Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton's wounded form was lifted into the cabin with Angel immediately beginning emergency medical treatment. Wire had taken shrapnel from a mortar round that had detonated dangerously close to their position, and his pale complexion indicated significant blood loss. Petty Officer 2nd Class Sterling Fairfax, whose navigation expertise had helped the team survive this long in hostile territory, provided covering fire while Tank prepared to hoist the second wounded SEAL. North's precise marksmanship had kept enemy forces at bay, but his ammunition was nearly exhausted. Falcon 2-3, this is Control, came Isadora Ashworth's voice from the Base Operations Center. Weather conditions are deteriorating beyond safe flying parameters. Recommend immediate departure for base. Miranda ignored the transmission. Leaving with only half the team meant abandoning Americans to certain death. Professional pilots followed safety protocols, but this situation demanded something beyond professional competence. Master Chief Donovan appeared at the hoist point, supporting a SEAL, whose leg wound prevented independent movement. Sledge had maintained tactical command throughout the engagement, despite taking a bullet through his shoulder that had soaked his uniform in blood. 2 more wounded coming up, Tank reported. But we're taking increasingly accurate fire from multiple positions. These guys have figured out our hover pattern. Onshans. Another RPG streaked toward the aircraft, forcing Miranda into evasive maneuvers that threatened to send the helicopter spinning into the mountainside. Her flying had evolved beyond technical proficiency into something approaching supernatural ability to maintain aircraft control under impossible conditions. Angel, status on the casualties, Miranda called while simultaneously adjusting power settings to compensate for the additional weight of rescued personnel. Wire is stable but needs immediate surgical intervention, Angel replied, her hands working rapidly to control bleeding and establish intravenous fluid replacement. The second casualty has a compound fracture that requires orthopedic surgery. Tank's voice carried both relief and ongoing concern. 4 personnel aboard, but we've still got 4 more on the ground, including Master Chief Donovan, who refuses to leave his men. The tactical situation was approaching critical mass. Enemy forces had used the extended hover time to maneuver into positions that provided clear shots at the rescue aircraft. Ammunition among the remaining SEALs was nearly exhausted, and weather conditions continued deteriorating toward levels that might prevent flight operations entirely. Colonel Benedict Chamberlain's voice crackled through the radio with command authority. Falcon 2-3, you are ordered to return to base immediately with current personnel. Weather conditions prevent further rescue attempts. Miranda keyed her microphone with determination that surprised even herself. Negative, Falcon Base. I have 4 more American personnel on the ground who will not survive without immediate extraction. Continuing rescue operations. Westbrook, that's a direct order, Chamberlain replied. Return to base immediately. Instead of responding, Miranda switched to the SEAL team frequency. Sledge, I'm coming back for the rest of your team. Prepare remaining personnel for immediate extraction. Master Chief Donovan's voice carried gratitude mixed with tactical realism. 2-3, appreciate your commitment, but enemy forces are advancing rapidly. We may not be able to hold the position for another extraction cycle. Then we'll have to make this happen faster than anyone thinks possible, Miranda replied, beginning her approach for what would either be a perfect rescue operation or a catastrophic failure that would haunt military aviation forever. As she maneuvered the Black Hawk back toward the contested landing zone, Miranda realized that the next 10 minutes would determine not only whether 8 Navy SEALs survived, but whether institutional prejudice about women in combat aviation would be shattered by undeniable proof of capability under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The sandstorm intensified around them as enemy fire increased in both volume and accuracy. Time was running out for everyone involved, and success required flying skills that existed at the very edge of human possibility. Miranda banked the Black Hawk in a tight descending spiral that used the terrain to mask her approach from enemy observers. The 4 wounded SEALs in her cabin represented both success and an agonizing reminder that 4 more Americans remained trapped on the mountainside, with virtually no ammunition and enemy forces closing from every direction. 2-3, be advised that hostiles have moved heavy weapons into overwatch positions. Master Chief Donovan transmitted, his voice strained from blood loss and exhaustion. "They're anticipating your return and have positioned anti-aircraft assets along your previous approach route." Tank checked his ammunition supply while scanning the mountainous terrain for threats that could destroy them before they reached the remaining personnel. "Captain, I'm seeing muzzle flashes from elevated positions that weren't active during our first approach. They've had time to position shooters with clear fields of fire." The enemy had learned from the initial extraction, repositioning their forces to create overlapping kill zones that would trap any rescue aircraft in crossfire from multiple directions. What had been difficult during the first attempt would be nearly impossible now. Angel worked frantically over Staff Sergeant Thornton, whose wound was more severe than initial assessment had indicated. "Miranda, Wire's blood pressure is dropping. He needs a trauma surgeon within the next hour, or we're going to lose him." The medical urgency added another layer of pressure to an already impossible situation. Successfully extracting the remaining SEALs meant nothing if the wounded personnel died during transport back to base. But attempting to reach medical facilities meant abandoning Master Chief Donovan and his 3 remaining team members to certain death. "Control, this is 2-3, Miranda transmitted to Technical Sergeant Ashworth. "I need immediate medical guidance for critically wounded personnel, plus updated weather conditions for my return route." Isidore's response crackled through increasing static as the sandstorm interfered with radio communications. 2-3. Medical helicopter is standing by at Forward Operating Base Dusty to accept casualties. Current weather conditions show visibility dropping below emergency minimums. All aircraft except yours are grounded until the storm passes. The implications hit Miranda like a physical blow. She was now the only aircraft capable of operating in these conditions, which meant responsibility for not only the trapped SEALs, but also ensuring the wounded personnel reached medical treatment before they died from their injuries. Chief Warrant Officer Barnaby Livingston's voice broke through on the maintenance frequency with news that complicated every calculation. 2-3, we're receiving emergency locator beacon signals from Falcon 17's crash site. Captain Stratford's crew may have survivors requiring immediate extraction. Miranda felt the weight of impossible decisions crushing down on her. Master Chief Donovan and 3 SEALs trapped under enemy fire. Captain Stratford's crew possibly alive at a crash site miles away. Wounded personnel who needed immediate medical evacuation. And weather conditions that were rapidly eliminating any possibility of multiple extraction flights. "Tank, fuel status?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer would force her to make choices that would haunt her forever. "We've got maybe 40 minutes of flight time remaining," Tank replied grimly. "Enough for one more extraction, but not enough to hit multiple sites and still reach medical facilities." Petty Officer First Class Ezra Beaumont's voice suddenly filled the radio frequency with desperate urgency. "Any Falcon aircraft, this is Ghost. We've got enemy infantry within 20 meters and closing fast. They're using grenades to clear our defensive positions. If extraction doesn't happen in the next 10 minutes, we're finished." The brutal mathematics of combat had reduced everything to a time and distance equation that offered no perfect solutions. Miranda could save the remaining SEALs, or investigate the downed aircrew, but not both. She could rush the wounded to medical treatment or attempt a second rescue, but time and fuel prevented accomplishing everything. Major General Cordelia Lexington's voice cut through the tactical frequency with command authority that brooked no argument. 2-3. You are ordered to transport current casualties to medical facilities immediately. Do not attempt further rescue operations in these weather conditions. Miranda ignored the transmission, just as she had ignored Colonel Chamberlain's previous order. Military hierarchy meant nothing when American lives hung in the balance, and she was the only person capable of attempting their rescue. "Sledge, I'm coming back for your team," she announced. "Prepare for immediate extraction under heavy fire." 2-3, negative, Donovan replied. "Enemy positions make extraction impossible. Save yourselves and get the wounded to medical treatment." "Master Chief, with respect, that's not your decision to make," Miranda responded. "Nobody gets left behind. Prepare your team for pickup." She guided the Black Hawk toward the SEAL position using a completely different approach route that took advantage of terrain features to avoid the anti-aircraft positions that had been established during her absence. Flying through mountain passes with visibility measured in feet, required navigation skills that went beyond training into something approaching intuition. Corporal Anastasia Pembroke's voice crackled through the radio from her maintenance position back at base. 2, 3, Spark here. Your aircraft is showing stress indicators beyond normal operational parameters. Recommend immediate return to base for structural inspection. Noted, Spark, Miranda replied, though she had no intention of abandoning the mission due to maintenance concerns. We'll address structural issues after completing current rescue operations. The approach to the SEAL position revealed that enemy forces had used the time between extractions to establish prepared positions that dominated every possible landing zone. Automatic weapons fire erupted from concealed positions as soon as her aircraft became visible through the sandstorm. Taking fire from multiple directions, Tank reported, his door gun returning fire toward muzzle flashes that appeared and disappeared in the swirling dust. They've got us bracketed with heavy machine guns. Miranda brought the aircraft into an aggressive spiral descent that used maximum power changes and violent maneuvering to present a difficult target for enemy gunners. The Black Hawk shuddered under multiple impacts as small arms fire found its mark against non-critical components. Aircraft damage report, she called, while simultaneously adjusting flight controls to compensate for what felt like hydraulic system degradation. Multiple hits to the fuselage and tail boom, Tank replied. I think we've lost some hydraulic pressure, but primary flight controls are still responding. Master Chief Donovan appeared in a defensive position among the granite boulders, providing covering fire for his 3 remaining team members who moved toward the extraction point with the mechanical precision of professionals who had conducted similar operations dozens of times. But enemy forces had positioned themselves to make this extraction infinitely more dangerous than the first attempt. Heavy machine gun fire created overlapping fields that made hovering impossible, while RPG teams moved into position to engage the rescue aircraft with weapons that could destroy it with a single hit. I can't establish a stable hover, Miranda announced. Enemy fire is too accurate and too intense. I need a different extraction method. Lieutenant Colonel Augustus Whitfield's voice broke through on the coordination frequency with intelligence that changed every tactical calculation. 2, 3, Vanguard here. Thermal imaging shows approximately 60 enemy fighters converging on your position from 3 directions. They're using the rescue operation to draw coalition forces into a prepared kill zone. The revelation that the entire operation had become an enemy trap added a new dimension of danger to an already impossible mission. The rescue attempt wasn't just about saving trapped Americans. It had become part of a larger enemy operation designed to inflict maximum casualties on coalition forces. Angel's voice came through the intercom with medical desperation. Miranda, Wire is going into shock. He needs immediate surgical intervention, or he won't survive the flight back to base. The competing demands of tactical necessity and medical emergency were tearing Miranda apart. Every minute spent attempting to extract the remaining SEALs was another minute that brought the wounded personnel closer to death. But abandoning Master Chief Donovan meant condemning 4 Navy SEALs to certain execution by enemy forces. Captain Theodore Blackwater's voice crackled through the intelligence frequency with information that offered one desperate possibility. 2, 3, Enigma here. We've identified a secondary landing zone approximately 400 meters northeast of the SEAL position. It's exposed to enemy fire but might allow extraction without hovering in their primary kill zone. Miranda studied the terrain through her windscreen, searching for the alternative landing zone that might provide their only hope of completing the rescue without losing everyone involved. The secondary location would require the SEALs to move across open ground under enemy fire, but it offered the possibility of landing briefly rather than maintaining a vulnerable hover. As she began maneuvering toward the alternative extraction site, Miranda realized that the next few minutes would determine whether her refusal to abandon American personnel would be remembered as heroic determination or reckless disregard for military safety protocols that existed for good reasons. The sandstorm intensified around them as enemy fire increased to levels that threatened to overwhelm even her exceptional flying abilities. The alternative landing zone materialized through the sandstorm as a narrow shelf of rock barely wide enough to accommodate the Blackhawk's landing gear. Miranda approached at maximum descent rate, using the terrain to mask her aircraft from the heaviest concentrations of enemy fire, while simultaneously fighting hydraulic problems that made precise control increasingly difficult. Landing zone is hot, Tank reported, his door gun engaging targets that emerged from concealed positions along the ridgeline. Multiple hostiles moving to intercept SEAL team movement. Through her windscreen, Miranda could see Master Chief Donovan leading his 3 remaining team members across 400 meters of exposed terrain toward the extraction point. Enemy fire erupted from rocky outcroppings as insurgent fighters realized the Americans were attempting to reach a new pickup location. "Sledge, you've got approximately 40 seconds to reach the landing zone before I lose hydraulic pressure completely," Miranda announced, her aircraft shuddering as damaged systems struggled to maintain flight capability. Petty Officer First Class Ezra Beaumont provided covering fire from a boulder field, his precise marksmanship keeping enemy heads down while his teammates moved toward salvation. Ghost had conserved his last magazine for this final sprint, knowing that every round needed to count in protecting the extraction. Angel's voice cut through the intercom with medical urgency that couldn't be ignored any longer. "Miranda, Wire's blood pressure is critical. I'm losing him. We need to be airborne in the next 60 seconds or he's not going to survive." The competing demands of tactical necessity and medical emergency created an impossible situation that tested every aspect of Miranda's decision-making ability. Land too early, and the remaining SEALs would die under enemy fire. Wait too long, and Wire would die from blood loss in her cabin. "Tank, the moment those 4 SEALs reach the aircraft, we're departing immediately," Miranda announced. "No time for secure loading procedures." Master Chief Donovan stumbled as enemy fire found its mark, a bullet tearing through his thigh and dropping him to one knee among the scattered rocks. Sledge pushed himself upright through sheer determination, refusing to slow the team's movement toward extraction, despite streaming blood that marked their route across the mountainside. Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton broke from concealment to assist his wounded team leader. Wire's communications expertise now focused entirely on coordinating the final sprint to safety. Despite his own serious injuries, Thornton provided suppressing fire that allowed Donovan to maintain forward momentum. 30 meters to the landing zone, Tank reported, his machine gun creating a protective umbrella of fire that kept enemy forces from achieving clear shots at the running Americans. "But we're taking heavy fire from elevated positions." An RPG streaked past the aircraft so close that the explosion showered the cabin with rock fragments and metal debris. Miranda fought to maintain aircraft position as the blast wave threatened to destabilize her approach to the precarious landing zone. The hydraulic failure warning light illuminated with red urgency, indicating that her flight controls were degrading toward complete loss of authority. Landing with partial hydraulics was dangerous enough. Attempting takeoff with wounded personnel aboard while under enemy fire pushed beyond the boundaries of survivable aviation. 2-3, this is Control, Technical Sergeant Ashworth's voice crackled through increasing static. "Radar shows you are stationary in hostile territory. Weather conditions are approaching zero visibility. Recommend immediate departure." Miranda ignored the transmission, her entire focus concentrated on maintaining aircraft stability while the SEALs closed the final distance to extraction. Through her side window, she could see enemy fighters maneuvering to cut off the Americans' escape route. Petty Officer Second Class Sterling Fairfax reached the aircraft first, his navigation skills having identified the optimal route across the dangerous terrain. North dove through the cabin door with Tank immediately hauling him aboard while maintaining suppressive fire toward pursuing insurgents. Master Chief Donovan arrived seconds later, his wounded leg threatening to collapse under the strain of crossing 400 meters under fire. Sledge rolled into the cabin as automatic weapons fire sparked off the aircraft's armored hull, enemy rounds coming close enough to shatter Perspex windows. 3 aboard, 1 more coming, Tank reported, though his voice carried concern about the volume of incoming fire that threatened to overwhelm their defensive capability. Staff Sergeant Thornton sprinted the final 20 meters with enemy fighters less than 50 yards behind him. Wire's tactical expertise had allowed him to time his movement perfectly, but pursuing insurgents were close enough that their automatic weapons fire created lethal patterns around the extraction point. An enemy grenade exploded between Thornton and the aircraft, the blast wave sending shrapnel into his back and legs while simultaneously creating a smokescreen that obscured his final approach to safety. Through the debris and confusion, Tank could barely see the SEAL staggering toward the Black Hawk. "Wire's hit but still moving," Tank announced, reaching out of the cabin to guide the wounded communications specialist into the aircraft. "All personnel aboard. Go, go, go." Miranda applied maximum power while simultaneously pulling collective and forward cyclic, pushing her damaged aircraft beyond normal operational limits in a desperate attempt to achieve flying speed before enemy fire could destroy them completely. The Black Hawk lifted off the rocky shelf with barely 6 inches of rotor clearance on either side, climbing through automatic weapons fire that intensified as insurgent fighters realized their targets were escaping. Multiple rounds impacted the aircraft's belly and tail section, creating new damage to systems already compromised by previous hits. Aircraft status? Miranda called, fighting to control flight path as hydraulic pressure continued dropping toward zero. "We're flying, but I'm showing multiple warning lights," Tank replied, scanning gauges that indicated various system failures. "Hydraulic pressure is minimal, fuel is critical, and I think we've lost part of the tail rotor authority." Angel's voice carried both relief and ongoing medical desperation. "All 4 SEALs aboard, but I've got 3 casualties requiring immediate surgical intervention. Wire and Sledge are both going into shock, and Thornton has shrapnel wounds that need immediate attention." The successful extraction of Master Chief Donovan's team represented a victory that had seemed impossible just minutes earlier. But aircraft damage, fuel limitations, and medical emergencies meant that reaching safety would require flying skills that pushed beyond the boundaries of normal helicopter operations. Major General Cordelia Lexington's voice cut through the radio frequency with command authority. 2-3, excellent work on the extraction. Proceed immediately to Forward Operating Base Dusty for medical evacuation of casualties. Hammer, this is 2-3, Miranda replied, though her response would create additional controversy. Request immediate search and rescue coordination for Falcon 17 crash site. We still have American personnel unaccounted for. The silence that followed her transmission indicated that military leadership was grappling with the implications of Miranda's request. She had successfully rescued 8 Navy SEALs under impossible conditions, but now she was suggesting additional rescue operations with a damaged aircraft and critically wounded personnel aboard. 2-3, negative on additional rescue operations, came Colonel Chamberlain's voice. Your aircraft is mission incapable, and you have medical emergencies requiring immediate attention. Miranda studied her instrument panel, evaluating the aircraft's remaining capability against the possibility that Captain Stratford and his crew might be alive at the crash site. The emergency locator beacon signals suggested survivors, but reaching them would require flying with compromised systems through weather conditions that continued deteriorating. Chief Warrant Officer Barnaby Livingston's voice broke through on the maintenance frequency with technical analysis that would influence every decision. 2-3, Torque here. Based on your reported damage, recommend immediate landing at nearest suitable facility. Continued flight operations risk catastrophic failure. The weight of command decisions that had no perfect solutions pressed down on Miranda like physical pressure. She had proven herself capable of accomplishing the impossible, but success had created new responsibilities that tested the limits of both courage and judgment. Through her headset, she could hear Angel working frantically to stabilize the wounded SEALs, while Tank monitored aircraft systems that continued degrading with each passing minute. The sandstorm raged around them as they flew toward what might be safety or might be another impossible challenge that would test every aspect of her determination to bring everyone home alive. Captain Theodore Blackwater's voice crackled through the intelligence frequency with information that would determine their next course of action. 2-3, Enigma here. We've established radio contact with survivors at Falcon 17 crash site. They're requesting immediate medical evacuation. The confirmation that Stratford's crew had survived the crash created one final test of Miranda's commitment to the principle that no American gets left behind, regardless of personal cost or institutional pressure to prioritize medical evacuation over additional rescue operations. Miranda stared at her instrument panel as competing moral imperatives tore at her consciousness. 8 rescued SEALs lay wounded in her cabin, 3 of them requiring immediate surgical intervention to survive. Her aircraft limped through deteriorating weather with hydraulic systems barely functional and fuel approaching critical minimums. Every rational calculation demanded immediate flight to medical facilities. But Captain Stratford's crew was alive at a crash site 12 miles southwest, and she was the only pilot capable of reaching them before enemy forces or exposure claimed their lives. Angel, realistic assessment of our casualties, survival time, Miranda asked, though she dreaded the answer that would influence her decision. Lieutenant Commander Serafina Blackthorne looked up from Staff Sergeant Thornton, whose shrapnel wounds had created internal bleeding that required immediate surgical repair. Wire might have 45 minutes before blood loss becomes irreversible. Master Chief Donovan could last an hour with his leg wound, but that's assuming no complications from shock. Tank monitored aircraft systems that continued degrading with each passing minute. "Captain, we've got maybe 20 minutes of fuel remaining at current consumption rates. The crash site is 15 minutes away, but that leaves virtually no reserve for emergencies." The mathematics were brutal and unforgiving. Attempting to rescue Stratford's crew meant gambling the lives of 8 Navy SEALs against the possibility of saving 4 aircrew members. But abandoning fellow aviators violated every principle that had driven Miranda to become a military pilot. Captain Theodore Blackwater's voice crackled through the intelligence frequency with updates that complicated every calculation. 2-3, Enigma here. Enemy forces have located Falcon 17 crash site and are moving to investigate. Time window for extraction is closing rapidly. The confirmation that insurgent fighters were approaching Stratford's position eliminated any possibility of delayed rescue operations. Either Miranda attempted extraction immediately, or Stratford's crew would be captured or executed by enemy forces who had little regard for prisoners of war. Master Chief Kane Donovan, despite his wounds and blood loss, struggled to sit upright in the cabin. "Captain, speaking for my team, we support whatever decision you make. Those aircrew put their lives at risk trying to extract us. We won't abandon them now." Sledge's words carried the moral authority of someone who understood the brotherhood that existed among warriors who faced death together. His endorsement provided emotional support for a decision that transcended normal operational parameters. Technical Sergeant Isadora Ashworth's voice broke through increasing static as the sandstorm interfered with radio communications. 2-3, control here. Weather conditions at the crash site show 0 visibility, with surface winds gusting to 70 knots. Landing may be impossible. Miranda adjusted her course toward coordinates that marked Captain Stratford's position, knowing that the flight would test her damaged aircraft beyond its remaining capability. The decision had been made through conscience rather than calculation, accepting risk that military doctrine would classify as unacceptable. "All personnel, prepare for emergency landing procedures," she announced. "We're attempting extraction of Falcon 17 survivors under extreme weather conditions with compromised aircraft systems." Petty Officer First Class Ezra Beaumont, whose call sign Ghost reflected his ability to appear and disappear in combat situations, checked his remaining ammunition. "Captain, if enemy forces are at the crash site, we might need to provide security for the extraction." The prospect of conducting combat operations with wounded personnel aboard a failing aircraft added another layer of complexity to an already impossible mission. But the SEALs had proven their capability under extreme conditions, and their support might be the difference between successful rescue and catastrophic failure. Angel secured her medical equipment for what would likely be violent maneuvering during the approach to Stratford's position. "Miranda, I'll need to prioritize casualties if we take on additional wounded personnel. Medical resources are already stretched beyond capacity." The crash site appeared through the sandstorm as a scattered debris field where Stratford's Black Hawk had impacted on a rocky slope. Pieces of rotor blades and fuselage components were spread across several hundred meters, indicating a crash that should have been unsurvivable. But movement among the wreckage confirmed that at least some of Stratford's crew had survived the impact. Miranda could see figures signaling from behind aircraft sections that provided minimal shelter from both the weather and potential enemy observation. Visual contact with survivors, Miranda reported, count 4 personnel in defensive positions around the wreckage. Tanks scanned the surrounding terrain for threats that might complicate the rescue operation. "Captain, I'm seeing movement on the ridgeline approximately 800 meters south of the crash site. Could be enemy forces moving to investigate." The tactical situation was deteriorating exactly as intelligence reports had predicted. Enemy fighters were converging on the crash site, while weather conditions made precise flying nearly impossible with a fully functional aircraft, much less one suffering from multiple system failures. Sergeant First Class Thaddeus Wellington prepared fast rope equipment despite his own wounds from the previous extraction. Tank understood that speed would be critical for any chance of successful rescue, and traditional landing procedures would consume time they didn't have. "Survivors are signaling that they have wounded personnel," Miranda observed, watching hand signals from Stratford's position. "This is going to require medical evacuation under fire." Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton, whose communications expertise had helped coordinate the SEAL extraction, struggled to operate radio equipment with hands weakened by blood loss. 2-3, wire here. I'm monitoring enemy frequencies. They're coordinating a sweep of the crash site area. The confirmation that insurgent forces were actively searching for the downed aircrew eliminated any possibility of a methodical rescue operation. Miranda would need to extract Stratford's crew quickly or watch them disappear into enemy custody. Chief Warrant Officer Barnaby Livingston's voice broke through on the maintenance frequency with technical warnings that couldn't be ignored. 2-3, Torque here. Your aircraft is showing signs of imminent hydraulic failure. Recommend immediate landing at any available site. Miranda ignored the mechanical warnings, just as she had ignored previous orders to abandon rescue operations. Aircraft could be repaired or replaced, but American lives lost to enemy action or institutional hesitation were gone forever. The approach to Stratford's position required flying through turbulence that threatened to tear her damaged aircraft apart. Mountain winds accelerated by the sandstorm created downdrafts and wind shear that challenged every aspect of her flying ability. Hydraulic pressure approaching zero, Tank reported, his voice tight with concern. We're going to lose flight control authority within the next few minutes. Through her windscreen, Miranda could see Captain Stratford waving from behind a section of twisted fuselage. Falcon was wounded but mobile, supporting what appeared to be his crew chief, who had suffered injuries in the crash that prevented independent movement. Lieutenant Colonel Augustus Whitfield's voice crackled through the coordination frequency with intelligence that confirmed their worst fears. 2-3, Vanguard here. Enemy forces are within 200 meters of the crash site and closing rapidly. You have minutes before they overrun the survivors. The race between rescue operations and enemy advance had reached its critical phase. Miranda needed to extract 4 aircrew members before insurgent fighters could capture or execute them, while simultaneously managing aircraft systems that were failing in real time. Petty Officer Second Class Sterling Fairfax, whose navigation expertise had been crucial during the SEAL extraction, studied the terrain around Stratford's position. Captain, I don't see a viable landing zone. You'll need to hover while we fast rope down to assist with casualty evacuation. The prospect of maintaining a hover with failing hydraulics while under potential enemy fire represented the most challenging flying of Miranda's career. But Stratford's crew had risked their lives attempting to rescue Navy SEALs, and abandoning them now would violate every principle of military brotherhood. Corporal Anastasia Pembroke's voice broke through on the maintenance frequency with updates that reflected the aircraft's deteriorating condition. 2-3, Spark here. Stress indicators show your airframe is approaching structural limits. Recommend immediate cessation of aggressive maneuvering. Miranda brought the Black Hawk into position above Stratford's location, fighting to maintain controlled flight as hydraulic pressure dropped towards zero. Below, she could see enemy fighters emerging from concealment positions as they closed on the crash site. The final rescue attempt was about to begin under conditions that would test every aspect of her flying ability, her crew's competence, and their collective commitment to the principle that no American gets left behind regardless of personal risk or institutional pressure. Miranda fought to maintain a stable hover as her Black Hawk's hydraulic systems reached complete failure. The aircraft shuddered violently in the mountain winds, requiring constant control inputs to prevent catastrophic loss of altitude above the crash site, where Captain Stratford's crew waited for extraction that might never come. Hydraulics are gone, she announced through gritted teeth, her arms straining against flight controls that now required physical force instead of hydraulic assistance. I can hold this position for maybe 3 minutes before muscle fatigue makes controlled flight impossible. Tank dropped his fast rope toward the wreckage below, but the 40-foot descent would be complicated by aircraft instability that threatened to slam him into the rocky terrain or twisted metal that surrounded Stratford's position. Going down, Tank reported, beginning his descent through rotor wash that created miniature tornadoes of sand and debris. Stand by for casualty assessment and evacuation procedures. Through her side window, Miranda could see enemy fighters emerging from concealment positions along the ridgeline. Insurgent forces had used the rescue operation to close within effective weapons range, and their automatic weapons fire began impacting the rocky slope around the crash site. Master Chief Kane Donovan struggled to his feet despite blood loss and exhaustion. Captain, Ghost and I can provide suppressive fire while Tank coordinates casualty evacuation. North can handle communications coordination from his position. Sledge's determination to contribute despite his wounds exemplified the warrior ethos that refused to accept helplessness even under impossible circumstances. His tactical expertise would be crucial for defending the extraction against enemy forces that had superior numbers and positioning. Petty Officer First Class Ezra Beaumont positioned himself at the cabin door with his remaining ammunition, scanning the surrounding terrain for targets that presented immediate threats to the rescue operation. Ghost's marksmanship skills had proven decisive during previous engagements, and his precise fire might be the difference between successful extraction and catastrophic failure. Angel worked frantically over Staff Sergeant Thornton, whose shrapnel wounds had created internal bleeding that required immediate surgical intervention. "Miranda, Wire's blood pressure is dropping rapidly. He needs a trauma surgeon within the next 20 minutes, or we're going to lose him regardless of what happens here." The medical urgency created a countdown that measured lives in minutes rather than hours. Every second spent hovering above the crash site brought Wire closer to irreversible shock, but abandoning Stratford's crew meant certain death for fellow aviators who had risked everything attempting to save Navy SEALs. Tank reached the ground and immediately moved toward Stratford's position behind a section of twisted fuselage that provided minimal protection from both weather and enemy observation. "I've got visual on 4 survivors," he reported. "Falcon is mobile but wounded. His crew chief appears to have leg injuries that prevent independent movement." Captain Declan Stratford emerged from behind the wreckage with obvious relief at seeing rescue personnel arrive. Falcon had maintained defensive positions for over 2 hours, using aircraft debris as cover while waiting for extraction that he had begun to believe would never come. "Tank, we've got Sergeant Williams with compound fractures in both legs," Stratford called over the wind and rotor noise. "Corporal Davis has a head injury that's affected his consciousness. We need immediate medical evacuation for both casualties." The confirmation that Stratford's crew included seriously wounded personnel added another layer of complexity to an extraction that was already pushing beyond the boundaries of survivable aviation. Miranda's aircraft was barely controllable, her existing casualties were approaching critical status, and enemy forces were advancing rapidly. Automatic weapons fire erupted from elevated positions as insurgent fighters realized the rescue aircraft was vulnerable during the extended hover operation. Bullets impacted the rocky terrain around Tank's position while he attempted to assess the injured aircrew members. Taking accurate fire from multiple directions, Ghost reported, his return fire precisely aimed at muzzle flashes that appeared and disappeared among the granite outcroppings. Enemy forces are within 300 meters and closing. Miranda felt her aircraft losing altitude as muscle fatigue made it increasingly difficult to maintain controlled flight without hydraulic assistance. The Black Hawk dropped 8 feet before she could arrest the descent, bringing her dangerously close to the rocky terrain below. "Altitude warning," she announced, though everyone could feel the aircraft's instability as mountain winds and mechanical failure combined to create flight conditions that existed at the very edge of survivability. Petty Officer Second Class Sterling Fairfax monitored radio frequencies while providing tactical updates from his position in the cabin. "Captain, north here. I'm picking up enemy communications indicating they've identified our hover position. They're coordinating indirect fire against our location. The prospect of mortar or RPG fire directed at a stationary aircraft created urgency that transcended all other considerations. Miranda needed to complete the extraction and depart immediately, or watch everyone aboard die in the destruction of her helicopter. Tank secured a hoist line around Sergeant Williams, whose leg injuries required him to be lifted rather than climbing independently into the aircraft. "First casualty coming up," he reported. "This is going to take time we don't have." Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton, despite his own serious wounds, assisted with communications coordination from his position in the cabin. "Captain, Wire here. I'm monitoring indirect fire coordination on enemy frequencies. They're calling for mortar strikes on our position." The confirmation that enemy forces were preparing indirect fire attacks eliminated any possibility of methodical evacuation procedures. Miranda would need to extract all personnel immediately, or accept that everyone involved would die together. Angel prepared additional medical equipment as casualties from both helicopter crews created patient loads that exceeded her treatment capability. "I need priority guidance for medical treatment. We're going to have more wounded personnel than I can handle simultaneously." Corporal Davis appeared at the hoist point, his head injury making him unsteady but still capable of assisted evacuation. Tank helped secure the aircrew member to the hoist line while automatic weapons fire increased in volume and accuracy. Second casualty coming up. Tank reported, though his voice carried concern about the amount of time required for individual evacuation of 4 additional personnel. Miranda's aircraft dropped another 6 feet, as her strength failed against flight controls that demanded constant physical force to maintain position. The Black Hawk was becoming increasingly difficult to control, as both mechanical failure and pilot fatigue combined to create impossible flying conditions. "I can't hold this position much longer," she announced, though stopping the extraction meant abandoning Tank and leaving him to die alongside Stratford's crew. Captain Stratford reached the hoist point, supporting his crew chief, whose mobility was limited by leg injuries that required assistance for every movement. Falcon had maintained tactical command throughout the ordeal, and his leadership had kept his crew alive until rescue became possible. "Final 2 personnel ready for extraction," Tank reported, "but enemy forces are within effective weapons range. We're about to be overrun." An RPG streaked toward the aircraft, forcing Miranda into violent evasive maneuvering that nearly resulted in uncontrolled flight into the mountainside. Her damaged helicopter responded sluggishly to control inputs that should have produced immediate course corrections. Ghost's precisely aimed fire eliminated the RPG operator, but additional insurgent fighters appeared from concealment positions that had been established during the extended rescue operation. Enemy forces had used the time to position themselves for maximum effectiveness against the vulnerable aircraft. "All personnel aboard," Tank finally reported as he hauled himself through the cabin door. "Go, go, go." Miranda applied maximum power while simultaneously pulling collective and forward cyclic, pushing her failing aircraft beyond any reasonable operational limits in a desperate attempt to achieve flying speed before enemy fire could destroy them completely. The Black Hawk lifted away from the crash site with 12 wounded personnel aboard, carrying a patient load that strained both medical resources and aircraft performance. But successful extraction of Stratford's crew represented the completion of an impossible rescue mission that had saved 12 American lives under conditions that should have resulted in total failure. Technical Sergeant Isadora Ashworth's voice crackled through increasing static as the sandstorm continued, interfering with radio communications. 2, 3, control here. Medical helicopters are standing by at Forward Operating Base Dusty. Weather conditions show marginal improvement for emergency medical evacuation. The confirmation that medical facilities were prepared for mass casualty reception provided hope that the wounded personnel might survive injuries that would otherwise prove fatal. But reaching those medical facilities would require flying with aircraft systems that were failing in real time. Angel worked rapidly to stabilize multiple casualties while Tank assessed aircraft damage that had accumulated during the extended rescue operations. Both crew members understood that their survival depended on Miranda's ability to fly a barely controllable helicopter through weather conditions that had grounded all other aircraft. As they flew through the sandstorm toward medical facilities that might save lives or might be unreachable with a failing aircraft, Miranda realized that the most challenging part of the mission was just beginning. Miranda's arms burned with exhaustion as she fought to maintain controlled flight through the sandstorm. Without hydraulic assistance, every control input required physical force that was draining her strength with each passing minute. The Black Hawk responded sluggishly to her commands, wallowing through the turbulent air like a wounded bird struggling to stay airborne. Fuel warning light just illuminated. Tank reported from his crew chief position, though his attention was divided between monitoring aircraft systems and assisting Angel with medical treatment of 12 wounded personnel crammed into a cabin designed for 8 passengers. The fuel emergency added another critical element to their race against time. Miranda calculated distance to Forward Operating Base Dusty against remaining fuel reserves, factoring in headwinds that reduced their ground speed and increased consumption beyond normal parameters. Angel worked frantically between multiple casualties, her medical supplies stretched beyond capacity. "I'm losing wire," she announced, her voice tight with professional frustration. "His blood pressure is dropping despite fluid replacement. He needs immediate surgical intervention." Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton's condition had deteriorated during the extended rescue operations. Wire's shrapnel wounds had created internal bleeding that couldn't be controlled with field medical techniques, and his pale complexion indicated shock that could become irreversible within minutes. Lieutenant Commander Serafina Blackthorne moved between casualties with systematic efficiency, triaging injuries to prioritize treatment for those most likely to survive with immediate intervention. Sergeant Williams from Stratford's crew required orthopedic surgery for compound leg fractures. while Corporal Davis showed signs of brain injury that could prove fatal without neurosurgical care. "Miranda, I need you to know that several of these men might not survive the flight to medical facilities," Angel said quietly, her honesty reflecting medical realities that couldn't be changed through determination alone. Master Chief Kane Donovan, despite his own leg wound and blood loss, assisted with casualty care from his position on the cabin floor. "Doc, what can we do to improve their chances during transport?" Sledge's question carried the tactical mindset that sought solutions rather than accepting defeat, even when facing medical emergencies that exceeded their capabilities. His leadership had held the SEAL team together during impossible circumstances, and now he focused that same determination on saving wounded personnel. The aircraft shuddered as structural stress from manual flight control created vibrations that hadn't existed during normal operations. Miranda could feel the airframe protesting against flying techniques that compensated for failed hydraulic systems through aggressive control inputs. Captain Declan Stratford, whose rescue had required risking everyone aboard the aircraft, struggled to assist with medical care despite his own injuries. "Doc, my crew chief has emergency medical training. Williams can help with treatment procedures if you need additional hands." Falcon's offer represented the warrior brotherhood that transcended service rivalries. His willingness to contribute, despite exhaustion and wounds, exemplified the mutual support that defined military aviation culture. Technical Sergeant Isadora Ashworth's voice crackled through the radio with navigation updates. 2-3, control here. Surface winds at Dusty are gusting to 45 knots, with visibility improving to half a mile. Medical personnel are standing by for mass casualty reception. The weather improvement provided hope that landing might be possible, but Miranda's physical condition was deteriorating as rapidly as her aircraft's mechanical systems. Flying without hydraulic assistance required constant muscle tension that was creating fatigue beyond anything she had experienced. Petty Officer First Class Ezra Beaumont monitored radio frequencies while applying pressure to his own wounds from the earlier firefight. "Captain, Ghost here. I'm picking up medical evacuation helicopter frequencies. They're coordinating surgical teams for our casualties." The confirmation that trauma surgeons were preparing for immediate operations provided encouragement that some of the wounded personnel might survive injuries that would otherwise prove fatal. But reaching those medical facilities still required flying an aircraft that was approaching complete mechanical failure. Tank checked fuel consumption against distance remaining, his calculations showing margins that barely allowed for successful completion of the flight. "Captain, we're cutting this extremely close on fuel. No reserves for approach delays or weather diversions." The fuel situation eliminated any possibility of multiple approach attempts if the first landing proved unsuccessful. Miranda would have one opportunity to set the aircraft down safely, and failure meant everyone aboard would die in a crash that might have been prevented through different tactical decisions. Angel's voice carried medical urgency that couldn't be delayed. "Miranda, I need to perform emergency procedures on Wire. His airway is compromised, and he's going into respiratory distress." Lieutenant Commander Blackthorne began emergency medical intervention while the aircraft continued flying through turbulence that made delicate procedures nearly impossible. Her surgical skills were being tested under conditions that challenged even experienced trauma surgeons in fully equipped operating rooms. Corporal Anastasia Pembroke's voice broke through on the maintenance frequency with technical warnings about aircraft condition. 2-3, spark here. Vibration analysis indicates structural stress approaching critical levels. Recommend immediate landing at nearest suitable facility. Miranda ignored the mechanical warnings, just as she had ignored previous orders and safety recommendations that conflicted with her commitment to bringing everyone home alive. Aircraft could be repaired or replaced, but the wounded personnel required immediate medical treatment that was only available at Forward Operating Base Dusty. The outline of the medical facility began appearing through the clearing sandstorm, runway lights visible through reduced visibility that still challenged normal landing procedures. But approaching the base would require precision flying with an aircraft that no longer responded predictably to control inputs. Chief Warrant Officer Barnaby Livingston's voice provided final technical assessment. 2-3, torque here. Your aircraft has exceeded all structural and operational limits. Whatever you've accomplished today has redefined what's possible with damaged rotorcraft. The recognition from Torque carried special significance because his mechanical expertise allowed him to understand exactly how impossible Miranda's flying had become. His professional assessment confirmed that she had achieved something that would be studied in aviation schools for decades. Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton stirred briefly, his consciousness returning as Angel's emergency medical procedures restored his breathing. "Doc," Wire whispered weakly, "tell the captain. Best flying I've ever experienced." His words, spoken despite critical injuries and exhaustion, represented the highest compliment possible from a combat veteran who had flown dozens of missions under challenging conditions. Wire's assessment carried authority that transcended rank or service rivalries. Angel continued medical treatment while preparing for landing procedures that would transition casualties to trauma surgeons. "Miranda, the moment we touch down, I need immediate evacuation of the most critical patients. Every second will count for their survival." The approach to forward operating base Dusty required navigating between communication towers and buildings while fighting crosswinds that threatened to destabilize an aircraft already compromised by mechanical failure and pilot exhaustion. Ren. Miranda aligned with the runway centerline, her vision blurred by fatigue, but her determination focused on completing the mission that had saved 12 American lives under impossible conditions. The landing would either mark the successful conclusion of an extraordinary rescue operation or represent the final tragedy in a series of events that had tested everyone beyond their limits. Petty Officer Second Class Sterling Fairfax provided final navigation updates. "Captain, north here. You're aligned with runway heading. Medical personnel are positioned for immediate casualty reception." The confirmation that trauma teams were ready for mass casualty treatment provided hope that the wounded personnel might survive long enough to reach operating rooms where their injuries could be properly addressed. Tank prepared for landing procedures while continuing to monitor aircraft systems that showed multiple failures across every major component. "Captain, whatever happens next, this has been the most extraordinary flying I've witnessed in 20 years of military aviation." His professional assessment carried weight because Tank had flown combat missions throughout multiple deployments, experiencing aviation challenges that tested pilots under extreme conditions. His recognition meant that Miranda had achieved something genuinely exceptional. As the aircraft approached touchdown, Miranda realized that success or failure in the next 60 seconds would determine whether the day would be remembered as an impossible rescue achievement or a tragedy that claimed everyone who had trusted her flying ability. The runway threshold passed beneath them as forward operating base Dusty prepared to receive casualties whose survival depended on surgical skills that would be tested under conditions that matched the aviation challenges that had brought them to safety. The runway at forward operating base Dusty rose to meet Miranda's Black Hawk as she executed what would later be described as the most challenging landing in military aviation history. Her arms trembled with exhaustion as she fought to control an aircraft that responded to her commands with the sluggishness of a machine pushed far beyond its design limitations. "Touchdown imminent," she announced, though her voice carried the strain of someone who had given everything to achieve the impossible. The aircraft settled onto the concrete with a jarring impact that sent vibrations through the airframe, but the wheels remained intact, and the fuselage held together despite structural stress that had exceeded every safety parameter. Miranda cut power to the engines as medical personnel rushed toward the aircraft from multiple directions. "Engine secure, aircraft on deck," Tank reported, his relief evident despite professional composure. "Medical teams are approaching for immediate casualty evacuation." Angel had prepared the wounded for rapid transfer to trauma surgeons, her organizational skills ensuring that the most critical patients would receive priority treatment. "Wire and Williams need immediate surgery," she called to the approaching medical teams. "Davis requires neurosurgical evaluation, and Master Chief Donovan needs vascular repair." The cabin doors opened to reveal organized chaos as trauma teams loaded stretchers with wounded personnel whose survival now depended on surgical skills rather than aviation heroics. Miranda remained in her pilot's seat, her hands still gripping the controls as if releasing them might undo everything they had accomplished. Lieutenant Commander Serafina Blackthorne stepped out of the aircraft with the satisfaction of someone whose medical expertise had contributed to saving lives under impossible conditions. Angel had maintained professional competence throughout an ordeal that would have challenged experienced trauma surgeons in fully equipped hospitals. Staff Sergeant Finnegan Thornton was transferred to a surgical unit with Angel providing detailed medical handoff to trauma surgeons. Wires got internal bleeding from shrapnel wounds, possible lung puncture, and he went into respiratory distress during transport. she reported with clinical precision. Master Chief Kane Donovan paused at the aircraft door despite his leg wound and exhaustion. "Captain Westbrook," Sledge said, his voice carrying respect that transcended military rank, "what you accomplished today saved 12 American lives. My team will never forget your commitment to bringing us home." His words carried the moral authority of someone who understood the difference between routine military operations and extraordinary acts that defined the character of individuals under extreme pressure. Sledge's recognition meant more than any official commendation because it came from warriors who had witnessed exceptional performance firsthand. Captain Declan Stratford approached Miranda's position with obvious difficulty, his own injuries limiting his mobility but not preventing him from expressing gratitude that came from personal experience. "Cyclone," Falcon said, using her call sign with newfound respect. "I've been flying combat missions for 8 years. What you did today was beyond anything I thought possible." The recognition from Stratford carried special significance because he had previously been skeptical of Miranda's capabilities. His admission represented the kind of institutional change that couldn't be mandated through policy but had to be earned through undeniable demonstration of competence under extreme conditions. Tank completed post-flight procedures while marveling at aircraft systems that had somehow continued functioning despite damage that should have resulted in catastrophic failure. "Captain, this bird is going to need complete reconstruction before it flies again." But it brought everyone home. Sergeant First Class Thaddeus Wellington's mechanical assessment confirmed that Miranda had achieved something that existed at the very edge of aviation possibility. Tank's professional opinion carried weight because his experience maintaining combat aircraft allowed him to understand exactly how impossible their survival had become. Major General Cordelia Lexington approached the aircraft with the purposeful stride of someone whose command decisions had been vindicated by results that exceeded every expectation. Hammer had supported Miranda's mission against institutional resistance, and the successful outcome validated her judgment about capability versus conventional assumptions. "Captain Westbrook," Hammer said, her voice carrying command authority tempered by genuine admiration, "I've just received preliminary reports of your rescue operations. 12 American personnel extracted under weather conditions that grounded all other aircraft with damaged equipment that should have made flight impossible." The recognition from Hammer represented institutional acknowledgement that capability transcended gender considerations when demonstrated under actual combat conditions. Her statement would influence military aviation policy for years to come. Colonel Benedict Chamberlain arrived at the aircraft with obvious reluctance, his previous dismissal of Miranda's abilities now confronted by undeniable evidence of exceptional performance. "Westbrook," he began, then stopped as words failed to adequately address the magnitude of what had been accomplished. The colonel's uncomfortable silence spoke louder than any apology could have expressed. His institutional prejudices had been shattered by performance that redefined what military leaders should expect from personnel they had underestimated based on assumptions rather than demonstrated capability. Technical Sergeant Isadora Ashworth monitored radio traffic as news of the successful rescue spread throughout the theater of operations. "Captain, control here. Every air traffic control facility in the region is requesting details of your flight operations. This is going to be studied in aviation schools for decades." The professional recognition from control reflected the understanding that Miranda's achievement had redefined operational possibilities under extreme conditions. Her flying had pushed beyond the boundaries of normal aviation into territory that would influence training and doctrine for future generations. Corporal Anastasia Pembroke emerged from the maintenance hangar with structural analysis equipment. Her mechanical expertise focused on understanding how an aircraft had survived operational stress that exceeded all design parameters. "Captain Spark here. This aircraft should have been unflyable after the first engagement. Your ability to maintain control represents flying skills that belong in military legend." The assessment from Spark carried special significance because her maintenance expertise allowed her to understand the mechanical impossibility of what Miranda had accomplished. Her professional evaluation confirmed that exceptional piloting had overcome aircraft limitations through skill rather than luck. Angel returned from the trauma units with medical updates that reflected the success of the rescue operations. All 12 personnel are in surgery or receiving appropriate medical treatment. The trauma teams believe that everyone will survive their injuries because we got them to medical facilities in time. The confirmation that every rescued person would survive represented the ultimate validation of Miranda's decision to continue rescue operations despite orders, mechanical failures, and personal risk that could have resulted in everyone's death. Chief Warrant Officer Barnaby Livingston completed his assessment of aircraft damage with professional amazement at what had been achieved with failing equipment. "Captain, Torque here. This helicopter flew for over 4 hours with damage that should have made controlled flight impossible. Your ability to adapt flying techniques to compensate for mechanical failure demonstrates aviation skills that exceed anything in my experience." The recognition from Torque carried weight because his maintenance expertise allowed him to understand the technical impossibility of what Miranda had accomplished. His assessment would become part of official reports that documented extraordinary achievement under conditions that challenged every aspect of military aviation capability. Lieutenant Colonel Augustus Whitfield approached with intelligence reports that put the day's events into strategic perspective. "Captain, Vanguard here. Your rescue operations not only saved 12 American lives, but also denied the enemy a significant propaganda victory. The mission accomplished strategic objectives that extend far beyond individual personnel recovery." The strategic assessment from Vanguard confirmed that Miranda's achievement had implications beyond immediate rescue operations. Her success had prevented enemy exploitation of American casualties while demonstrating military capability under extreme conditions. Petty Officer First Class Ezra Beaumont paused at the aircraft door despite exhaustion and his own wounds. "Captain," Ghost said quietly, "I've worked with pilots who talked about being exceptional. Today I flew with someone who proved it when proof mattered most." His words carried the moral authority of someone whose life had been saved through exceptional aviation skills demonstrated under impossible conditions. Ghost's recognition transcended service rivalries to acknowledge competence that had made survival possible for everyone involved. Captain Theodore Blackwater arrived with preliminary mission reports that would document the day's events for military history. "Captain Westbrook, Enigma here. What you accomplished today will redefine institutional assumptions about aviation capability under extreme conditions. This mission will be studied and referenced for decades." The recognition from Blackwater confirmed that Miranda's achievement would influence military policy and training far beyond the immediate rescue operations. Her performance had shattered institutional barriers through undeniable demonstration of capability under conditions that tested every aspect of military aviation. As medical personnel completed evacuation procedures and aircraft maintenance teams began assessing damage that told the story of impossible flying under extreme conditions, Miranda finally released her grip on the flight controls. Her hands shook with exhaustion, but her eyes reflected quiet satisfaction that came from proving herself when proof mattered most. The woman they had called Cyclone, but never allowed to fly into storms, had just demonstrated that institutional prejudice was no match for determined competence when American lives hung in the balance. Miranda Westbrook had taken 12 wounded personnel through conditions that had claimed other aircraft, using flying skills that redefined what was possible when everything that could go wrong did go wrong simultaneously. 4 hours and 17 minutes of flying that had rewritten every manual on impossible rescues, just as the mission briefing had predicted. But more importantly, it had proven that assumptions about limitations were often wrong when tested against individuals who refused to accept defeat, regardless of institutional resistance or impossible circumstances. The storms had finally found someone worthy of their fury, and she had emerged victorious with everyone she had promised to bring home safe. The end. Up next, 2 more incredible stories are waiting for you right on your screen. If you enjoy this one, you won't want to miss this. Just click to watch. And don't forget to subscribe. It would mean a lot.